Yeah, I mean, this goes back to I think what we just recently said is just the why. The why isn't strong enough because if you have a strong enough why, it'll pull you through any difficult time, right? It's if the why is strong enough, the how is easy,
Hmm.
right? And so that's I think why most people stop is that it's that why.
We've had internal tariffs from our government for so long. Now we're worried about the external ones.
Exactly. Well, I
And
think
I mean,
yeah,
you can
I
always
think
find something to complain about.
for sure. Look, I think the Canadian government is just upset that they didn't figure that out a little bit sooner to tax us a little heavier. That's all.
They're like, oh, we could have had the tariff tax
Yeah.
and put
God
that one
damn
into
it.
play. That would have been
God damn it, Trump.
fantastic. Well, I think, Gary, thanks so much for joining us on the show here. You've talked quite a bit about designing a life of your choice and how, while it's not an easy feat, it's something that, you have to cultivate your mindset, your direction to be able to have that happen. This is the Money Mindset and Mentoring podcast. And I think that's why I was super excited to have you on, is really around your perspective around, let's start off just by really talking about the mindset. For somebody to be successful in whatever they're doing, whether it's real estate investing, running a business, running a family, or just getting healthy, mindset is one of those most important things to win first.
Yeah, 100% it is. Because prior to me being able to shift my mindset to where it is today, I complained about a lot of things. I complained when I was at TD Bank that why is it that somebody can get paid millions of dollars in the same corporation that I was working at? And what I learned was that, and this is really important, is not to complain, right? And to work. If you work hard on your job, you can make a living. If you work hard on yourself, you can make a fortune. And that's from Jim Rohn. And once I heard that quote, that's what I started doing. And so, I'd go to work, do my 9 to 5, come home, and that's where I really started to understand this is how I can change my life and design a life and stop complaining. And so mindset is an important piece to all this.
I was talking with a lady down in Texas the other day, and their weather is the same all the time. 365 days a year, it's pretty much the same. And up in Canada, what we find is a lot of times people look outside and it's like, man, it's really cold. It's too cold. And then in the summertime, man, it's really hot. It's way too hot.
Yeah.
And in the fall, it's too wet, and all these other things. And, we can always find something that we're going to be complaining about. The question is does that get you anywhere? And the answer is probably no.
No, it doesn't. And speaking of the different seasons, ants think summer all winter and winter all summer, right? So yeah, you live a life like an ant, that'll definitely change your life for sure. Right.
Yeah, that the whole idea of, I think there was that one story of the one that had to put things into storage, and the other one was like, manana, 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 and then things into storage, and the guy's just kind of sitting around doing nothing. And then the one who actually put everything all away, now that the winter's come, the other one's just like, shoot, hey, can I grab some stuff?
Yeah.
And meanwhile, he's pointing at the other person who was working the whole time saying, haha, why are you toiling away? Look at how beautiful it is outside.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's not going to be beautiful.
Yeah, for sure. And listen, I'll share a few quotes. These ones I keep pretty close to me. Don't wish you were easier, wish you were better. Don't ask for less problems, ask for more skills. And this is my favorite one is make the goal to become a millionaire, not for the money, but for the person you'll become to achieve it. And if you really look at that quote, and those are all Jim Rohn quotes, and if you really look at that quote, to take it apart is that it's really not about the money. It's who you have to become, because the person that you become, even if you lost it all, you can get it all back again. Right. And that's really what the mindset is all about, is believing in yourself, realizing that there is no losing in life. It's just win or learn, and that mindset is what allows you to change. Right. It's, I remember even when I wrote a book one time and I thought there's no way I could ever write a book. You think of the daunting task, but anything in life that you tackle, you always have to just break it down into bite-sized, pieces, like, what do they say? Like, how do you eat an elephant? Like, like one bite at a time. And if you look at anything and break it down into small steps, anything is achievable, like anything, whether
Yeah,
it be.
John Cleese from Monty Python, before he actually used to do Monty Python, believe it or not, he used to do corporate training videos. And imagine Monty Python doing corporate training videos. And the one thing that I always said, because I did all these courses in adult learning, and the one thing that I always remembered was he talked about phone numbers. Now he's in the UK, and for a UK guy to talk about phone numbers, they don't make sense because, the numbers, they're all scattered all around and it has no pattern to it. It seems like, anyways, for us here in North America, they might say the same about us, but we have a group of 3 numbers, a group of 3 numbers, and a group of 4 numbers. It makes it easy for us to understand. So his whole concept is bit by bit. And if you go bit by bit on anything, that gives you a roadmap on how to get to that next level. So it's a step up, a graduated step up, rather than looking at this big daunting thing that you're trying to solve and you never get to be able to, get to that top of that pinnacle because you don't even take that first step.
Yeah, exactly. And every time as you're going through those steps as well too, is that you will encounter problems, you will encounter issues, but the best way to look at it is that whatever it is that you come across is a gift. And I think people don't look at that or realize that or understand it, that problems are gifts. And so if you can change that whole mindset and then realize, well, what am I supposed to learn from this problem? Because that gift that you get from it will allow you to open the next one that you're going to get, and that allows you to now be able to scale, to grow a business, to bring in the right people into your business, to then believe like, wow, can I actually pay somebody 20,000, 30,000, 50,000? Can I get the right talent? Can I have them build their business within my business and do things that I'm not good at, so you can work on your genius? That's what mindset allows you to do.
Yeah, I think problems to me are definitely opportunities. One of my favorite pastimes right now is Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. And when you go into a situation, you're rolling and say you're rolling with somebody, maybe you've rolled with them before, maybe you haven't. And all of a sudden that thing that always worked isn't working anymore. You're like, huh, now I've got a new riddle to solve. Now I've got something that I thought this was just game on, it's going to work every time. And now maybe they know my method of rolling, or maybe they're from a different gym and they learned this long time ago how to counter it, whatever it is. Now I've got to figure out how to solve that riddle again. And what a wonderful opportunity to develop yourself.
Yeah.
And just like in the gym, in life, it's the same thing. When you run into those challenges where, it was always just, easy street. And then all of a sudden you hit that hard moment, you get to choose your reaction then. And, you can't necessarily always choose what happens. I mean, we can't choose that, what's going to happen for our government necessarily in tariffs or in interest rates or all these other things, but we can choose how we're going to react to those things. Yeah. And what are we going to do?
Yeah, absolutely. And then after, once you start listening to whether it be podcasts or reading a book and you're starting to shift your mindset, you've got to take action. There's this great story that I heard, and this might help tie it in. There's 2 lumberjacks, and I heard this from Simon Sinek. There's 2 lumberjacks in the forest, all right, and they're chopping wood. And there's one lumberjack, and he leaves every day for an hour. But for whatever reason, the guy who leaves for an hour comes back and he chops more wood than the other guy. And this guy, it's going on for months. He can't figure it out. And he goes, "Where do you go? How is it that you're chopping more wood than I am? Every single day you leave for an hour." And he goes, "Oh, I'm leaving to go and sharpen my axe." And that's what the mindset is. That's where you're listening to those podcasts to sharpen your axe, reading those books, because then you can come back and then you can perfect or at least sharpen up those skill sets.
Absolutely. I think, the first thing to understand is, massive imperfect action beats perfect planning. That's rule number 1. But an upgrade on that would be massive, somewhat perfect action would beat, massive imperfect action. And massive perfect action obviously beats that one. And there's a hierarchy on that. And I think you're absolutely right, is taking those moments within your day. I had this one guy who was on my podcast. He talked about building margin in your day, in your time, to be able to go and sharpen your axe, to be able to go and take that moment to reinvest into yourself and repurpose yourself and get yourself in the right mindset, get yourself into the mindset of success so that you can go out and build the massive things you can do. But sometimes that one step back is going to give you 6 steps forward.
Yeah, absolutely. There was a time, and there still is, where, man, I used to hate going on stages. I used to hate doing talks. because I would get so nervous and the sweat would be running down my back. Okay. And I remember one time I had to introduce, we were able to bring Les Brown out to our brokerage to do a talk.
Oh,
Yeah,
I
it was
love it.
incredible. And I remember I was talking to somebody. I was doing a little coaching lesson with them, and at the end, she goes, "So what are you doing this weekend?" I go, "Well, I got to introduce Les Brown on stage," and I'm like, "I'm so nervous." And she
Oh my
goes, "Oh
God.
my God!" She goes, "I can help you." And so the coaching turned around from me coaching her to her coaching me, and I go, "Well, how?" And she goes, "I'll never forget this," and I use it every time. She goes, "The chemicals released in your body when you're nervous or when you're excited is exactly the same thing. So when you're on stage, just say you're excited." And so
Mm.
you always, when I was looking at people on stage, I'm like, how could they be excited? Like, I'm so excited to be here. Like, it's just incredible. And you're like, what? What do you mean? I'd be nervous. And so that reason why I share that story is that it shows you just by changing your mindset, just by changing words, that can actually change your experience. So the chemicals are still there. The heart rate is still racing. That doesn't leave. That's still there. Now I know that, oh, I'm ready for peak performance. And so just by changing the word from nervous to excited, changing that mindset changes the whole entire experience.
That's super interesting. Number one, first of all, kudos with you with Les Brown. He's one of my favorite speakers that I've listened to out of everybody. And you quote Jim Rohn a lot, which I do agree is a great source. I think my favorite one, if we're going to talk about favorite quotes, actually was from Les Brown when he says, if you do things that are easy in your life is going to be hard, and if you
Right.
do things that in your life that are hard, your life is going to be easy.
Yeah.
And man, I think that's one of the most true things. And one of those things is to do those things that make you uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And I think where you talk about the idea of going on stage and pivoting your perspective, because your perspective is more powerful than reality. And if you're on stage and you're fearful, I mean, nobody's going to bite you, at least hopefully not. Nobody's going to throw eggs or rocks, at least hopefully not. And what's the worst thing you're going to do is bumble out a couple words. I mean, maybe crawl into a ball or whatever. I mean, that could happen, but hopefully that's part of the performance. But the idea is you're not in a life-threatening situation, but your body thinks it is.
Yeah.
And I think your idea of around that you got from that individual, which I think is such a great thought, is to turn that around and turn that into a positive emotion. And I think a lot of times where people in those positions of not knowing, not understanding, instead of taking those as a position of duress, take those as a position of opportunity and say, I'm so excited because I don't know anything right now. Imagine how much more I could learn going forward.
Yeah. And the more that you learn, the more you realize how little you know. And that's one of I think the great things about life. And I think and as you get older and when I interview people who are older than me, they say it all the time, man, I know very little. Because you start to expand so much more and you realize how much more there is to actually learn. In your 20s, you know everything. I got two kids right now in their 20s, and they know a lot. They think they know a lot. And you look back and you're like, no, you don't, but they'll learn. They'll figure it out eventually.
But the one learning that I'm learning a lot about is what not to do. And I think the one thing you talk a lot about is the pivotal moment of when to say no. Because the idea of learning is not only about saying yes to everything, but it's about knowing where to say no. Where did you say no to something and how did it change the trajectory of where you were going?
Well, what it does is it allowed me to become laser focused because there's a thing called the shiny stone syndrome. And so many people get caught up in it because they don't have a roadmap. It would be like driving to Florida without GPS, without a roadmap, and not knowing where you're going. And so when you're able to write down or whiteboard or put these things down, it allows you now, if you stay focused, to saying these are the things that I say that I'm going to do. And I do this every single year at the beginning of the year to map out what it is that I want to do. Because now, especially when you're on social media, whether you're going to networking events, whatever it may be, people have their own journey and they're trying to have you be a part of their journey. And if you're not careful, you will now spend tons of time, lots of cycle in their journey. And you got to, and a lot, I see this all the time too, especially with email. Like email, like I'm in my emails maybe once a day, and because a lot of times email is other things that other people want me to do for them. There's a few things in there for me, obviously, but what I focus on is that whiteboard and my agenda, and that's what continues to keep me straight as an arrow on what I said that I need to accomplish this year.
And you brought up the word whiteboard a couple times, and I want people to kind of understand what is your spin on whiteboarding and how to use that effectively to be able to plan your day and plan your success.
Yeah. So what I do, here's what I'll actually map it right out. And if anybody is listening to this right now, get a pen out and write this down, because this is high level Jim Rohn stuff right here. So write down 50 things that you want. Most people can't, but if you can, write it all down. When you're done writing down those 50 goals, and you put a 1, 3, 5, or a 10 beside it, those numbers represent how long would it realistically take for me to get them. 1 year, 3 years, 5 years, or 10 years. Here's where people make the mistake. The 3, the 5, and the 10, put that in a drawer. Don't even look at it, because they're too big. They're too daunting. You can't even achieve them yet. Focus on your 1 year goals. Those 1 year goals is what you're going to put on your whiteboard. That's what you can achieve in that year. It could be paying off a credit card. It could be getting a pair of shoes. It could be taking a trip to Dominican, whatever. It doesn't matter. And then you're going to make those goals that you write down SMART goals: specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, time. Okay. And then what you want to do with the top 3 is put an asterisk beside them and ask why 3 times. Why do you want it? Well, here's an example. Well, why do you want an investment property? So I can get some cash flow. Why do you want the cash flow? So that I can maybe leave my full-time job. Why do you want to leave your full-time job? So that I can spend more time with my family. So then now its purpose is stronger than object. It's not the object. People, like, nobody ever wakes up and says, "I want to be a landlord." No, you don't. You're looking for financial freedom, and then financial freedom leads to other things. So that's high level how you do whiteboarding, because that is your map. That's how you get to what it is that you're trying to achieve.
Yeah, and I think that dovetail right into exactly what you talk about when you talk about with Simon Sinek, the starting with why. And I think that's so critically important, that when you're looking at your goals, it's not about that number on the piece of paper, because that number very quickly is going to become not motivating at all, because it's just a number. But if that number ties to something that really deeply affects you, I think a lot of times when people make a decision, they think they make a decision logically, but that's just not true. They'll make a decision emotionally and then logically back it up. And so many times we find ourselves, oh, no, I did that because of this. And you're like, well, no, you did that because, it was an emotional decision you made at that time.
Yeah, yeah.
And so being able to go through and connect to that emotion, so it'll always draw you into the path towards success, so you can say no to the things that you need to say no to, and continue to say yes to the things that you need to say to, so that you can move forward positively and get to your goal.
Yeah. And then what will end up happening is that all of a sudden certain things will happen. Certain people will come into your life, and you look in your whiteboard and it's like, I asked for this. And now you can act on it. It's such an incredible thing. And then you'll go back, and I do this every year, and I take a picture of it and I put it in my drawer. And then 3 years down the road, I'll look back, and I always put a check mark beside them. I'm like, and all of a sudden now, some of the things that I wrote down just start to happen.
Yeah.
And that's the roadmap, right?
Now, I want to talk a little bit about the lead into the freedom element of it. But before we get to the freedom element of it, I want to talk about some of the roadblocks that happen in the way. Mm-hmm. Where people say, I'm totally dialed into this idea of whatever that big thing is that they're focused on. They get started, and we see this. I mean, we're recording this in that sort of February, March timeframe. And there's that perfect time frame where people set those big goals at December, because, that's when Hallmark tells us to do it. And so we set our Hallmark goals for New Year's, and January comes through and we're like going to the gym. We're doing our 75 hard, but we go to like 33 hard, and we're like, this is good enough. Mm-hmm. What keeps people on the path when they start running off of where they need to go to for their pathway to success?
Why do they fall off?
Yeah. Why do they fall off?
Yeah. I mean, this goes back to, I think, what we just recently said, is just the why isn't strong enough. Because if you have a strong enough why, it'll pull you through any difficult time, right? It's if the why is strong enough, the how is easy, right? And so that's, I think, why most people stop, is that it's that why.
Well, I mean, we're both in the real estate space. So I want to get very dialed into solving this problem, because I think this is something mortgage brokers, real estate agents, financial planners, they all go through the same thing. They go out, they spend all this money on getting their license, they spend all this time on getting it, and they have all these, dreams of grandeur that they're going to be pulling up with their Maserati in a year from now, and life's going to be amazing. And a year from now, they're bouncing between their third brokerage, blaming everybody else as to why they're not successful. How do we get them at the beginning so they get on the right path? Because 90% of real estate agents fail.
Yeah, they do. And I think the reason why a lot of them end up failing is they're looking for something that they think is easy to do and it's not. It's just, you know, discipline weighs ounces, regret weighs tons. And that's the hard part, right? Is discipline. And you got to stay disciplined. You know, one of the things, if we're talking about real estate agents, here's a great tip for real estate agents. And one of the things that I did, because I think a lot of times they're always looking for the easy way, or, you know, leads coming in. The best leads are usually what's already in your database. You know, if you mind them and nurture them and look after them, they will do so much for you. One of the things that I did in the very first year as a realtor, I learned this from my broker, and I asked him, what's the best tip you can give me? And he had been in the game for a very long time. And he said, don't sell anything, sell yourself. Meaning, just be you. Don't try to be anybody else. Don't look at another realtor on social media. Try to be them. Just be you. And so what I did was I put aside $2,000 and I said, okay, this is my marketing budget. And then I just looked at all my friends on Facebook, because Instagram was even around then, or it might have been just coming up. And I reached out to everybody on my Facebook, and I went and had breakfast, or went and had lunch, or went and had coffee or dinner. That was my marketing budget. And when I sat down and talked to them, the only thing that I did was I talked about them. They already knew I was a realtor. They saw it on my Facebook profile, new real estate agent. So they knew. So I was focused on them. And by doing that, by wanting to know what's going on in their life, their families, financially, whatever it may be. And at the end, sometimes they would, hey, so what do you do, Garen? And I would tell them a little bit about me. But sometimes some of them didn't. That first year, I sold over 40 properties just by doing that simple task. And so it was discipline. I would meet with, you know, people 3 times a week. I just stayed disciplined. That's it. I think that's really the key. Discipline into your why.
Yeah, and I think a lot of times, and I agree with you, by the way, and we're very similar in that. In my first year of real estate, I sold, I think it was about 43 houses as well. And it was the same principles. It was get to know people, get to know them really well, get to know how you can help them, even if it's not with real estate, get to know how you can help them.
Yes.
And then in doing so, they're going to, go back and help you, because if you give to givers, givers give back.
Yes.
And so, that you find very quickly the people who are the takers, and you've got to handle that in a little bit of a different way. But if you give to givers, givers will give back. And they will always say, oh yeah, by the way, I do have a friend who's looking for real estate right now.
Yeah.
I do have somebody who's looking for an investment property. Sally over there down the street, they just got separated and they need some advice on what to do because they don't know how to deal with it. And so those things do happen, but it's because you're leading with giving first. And I think that lead with give is just such an important concept for real estate agents to know. But I think, getting out of the tactics and back to the strategy, and the strategy is getting into action. And you got into action. You said, look, I'm looking internal to the people that I know, and I'm building up from there. And I think most people, I've got a real estate buddy of mine down in Tucson, and he says for anybody to join his team, they have to have a database of at least 300 people, or they're not going to go into his team, because he knows they're going to fail.
Mm-hmm.
He knows right off they're going to fail because they don't know enough people to be successful. And if they can't go out and get that as a baseline, they're not going to be successful. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I think there's definitely some truth to that. I mean, now it also depends on maybe the team leads that you join, and depending on their database, you can also farm their database as well too. But yeah, look, it definitely helps that you have a database that you're coming in with, and then you have to have somebody that can also teach you to how to mine that, how to navigate through that, and then do it with consistency. That's really important. The other thing as well too, I would add to that, and I think you touched on it lightly there, is the giving starts the receiving process. But also what's really important is making sure you're the single point of contact for whatever it is that they need. So if they need a plumber, they need an electrician, it doesn't matter, anything within that industry, that you're the go-to person, because that opens up so many doors. Like whatever you need,
but think about that process, what you just said there. So like, say your database only has 100 people in there, and you're like, well, I want to be the go-to person. Well, what's the first thing to do? Go find some contractors. And then when you find those contractors, say, well, if I'm going to refer you, I want to get to know some of your clients. So I need to talk to some of your clients. And you talk to their clients to get them as like, hey, they called you Sally and said that you're a great referral for them. You did great work. I'm a real estate agent. I'm looking to refer them to my clients. Would you, boom, now you've just added somebody new to your database. But so just by looking out to a couple different contractors, you've probably added in 50 to 100 people just in your database alone by doing that.
Yeah, exactly. Or you can go door knocking, and you can put a different spin on it. You go door knocking. You have now your contractors, you have your plumber, you have your electricians, and you reach out to them, say, "Hey, look, if somebody mentions my name, will you give them 5% or 10% off?" Absolutely. Now you have all these people on this little piece of paper. Put this on your fridge, have your face on it, saying contact any of these people here. You're always going to need some handyman or somebody in your house. And then
Absolutely.
now that just opens up, because now you can actually have a conversation, and people will be like, okay, cool. Yeah, I'll open my door for you. And you're not even saying, hey, are you looking to buy or sell? Because what's the chance that all of a sudden somebody's going to say, you know what? I was actually going to list my home today. Thank God you're here. So you bring with a different approach. And I think if you just try to be a little creative, things can open up for you.
Yeah, I think so too. And I think the idea is you've got to get into action. You've got to get into action with purpose, with a plan, ideally with somebody who's done it before to show you how to do it, and then follow that roadmap. And because if somebody's done it before, why do you need to reinvent it?
Yeah.
Exactly. You know, that makes so sense.
It's like, look, if you drove a Pinto on a freeway or a Ferrari on a dirt road, what's going to get further faster? That Pinto. And it's not because the Pinto's faster, it's because the path has already been, created.
Well, it's also a more reliable car.
Yeah. Yeah.
Sorry, Ferrari,
But that's what mentorship is. That's what, when you have somebody that can help you and guide you to say, no, don't go there, go here.
Yeah, and I think that's important. And I think getting back to the big why around that is people do it because they want, we're going to use the F word, and they want freedom. Mm-hmm. And freedom can come in many different ways. And I think you've got some interesting perspectives on that. And I want to talk about the 3 different levels of freedom that somebody can attain.
Yeah, look, I think the very first freedom that most people are looking for when they're in that 9 to 5, because I was there, is financial freedom, right? You want to be able to do what you want to do, when you want to do it, with who you want to do it with. And the hard part, though, is how do you get to financial freedom? Because nobody teaches you it, right? Especially not in school. They don't teach you that in school. And so the best way to find financial freedom is to then go to places where they're teaching that. And so one of the places that I went to in the beginning was real estate events, because I learned very quickly, well, I won't say quickly, maybe a little bit, it took longer than I should have, but around 35, 36, I realized that I couldn't outpace inflation. Even at 2%, my job and the raise I was getting was around 1.4, 1.5%. So I'm like, I get it, because my house had bailed me out 3 times. What if I had just one more property? How would that change my life? And so I went down that path of learning how to purchase and buy in joint ventures, real estate. And from 2008 to 2014, I bought like 19 properties. I'm like, oh, I now learned the art of raising capital. Cool. So then after financial freedom, if you're able to get there, really what you realize, and this is where it goes back to your whiteboarding, is that it's yes, you want financial freedom, but what you're all chasing is time freedom. That's the most important thing that you want, because you can make more money, you can't make more time unless you're really looking after your body. But it's the time that you want, and it's the spending it with whoever you want to spend it with.
Yeah.
And
well, I think in both of those, I think those are very interesting 2 categories, because I look at both of those as a framework of currency.
Yeah.
And, when you look at money, money isn't about money. And I think there's one thing people get really wrong when somebody says, I want to be rich, or I want to have lots of money, because money is irrelevant. It's just it's a way that we can trade services for results. We can trade items for impact. And so currency is money is really the currency of impact, and so's time. So both of those currencies, the one thing that you've learned through real estate is leverage. And so we know with currency, we can get leverage. Like you talk about joint venture agreements. Look, you own a brokerage, and as a brokerage, you get leverage because you have a lot of people who are contributing to a similar direction. And so that gives you leverage. I think you can leverage time too. And by leveraging time, I think you can get compression. And by getting compression, you can actually gain more time. Yeah, and I think that's one of those things that you can actually get more time, but you have to look at it as leverage.
Yeah, I think what you're also touching on there as well too is the Robert Kiyosaki quadrant, right? Where you got your employee box, then you've got your investor box, and you got your self-employed box and your business box. And that business box is when you're leveraging time, other people's time, and that's really that ultimate piece there, because then now that allows you to step away from the business. And I'll share something a little bit more before we get into the third freedom, but the time freedom to me is the most important piece. And here's why. I learned this, through something I think that happened back in my early 30s. So my wife and I were about 32 years old, and my mom got diagnosed with cancer. And then a few months later, my mother-in-law got diagnosed with cancer. And then in September 2002, my mom passed away. And then once my mother-in-law saw that, 3 months later, she realized that the writing was on the wall and she passed away. And at that moment, I realized that we're not promised tomorrow. And so one of the things that we did when we started our company in 2010, Smart Home Choice, was we said, here's what we're going to do. And I sat down with the kids and I said, look, this is going to take some time away from you guys. What do you guys want from Smart Home Choice? And they said, we want a mascot. I'm like, okay, cool. What else do you want? Like, we want like $1 million every month. I'm like, okay, cool. What else do you guys want? We want like 2 months of vacation. I'm like, well, what about 4 months? Yeah, let's do 4 months of vacation. So when we started the company, I'm like, I wonder if we can actually do 4 months of vacation. And so we did that. And so every July and August we take off, and every December and January we take off. And so what I realized is that I would rather retire twice a year than wait until I'm 65 to retire. Because if I'm retiring every year, then I never have to worry about a date in the future. That means if I can find things that I'm passionate about, I'll just keep working and doing things that I enjoy doing right up until my last breath. And so I think it's really important to really understand the importance of time freedom and doing things on designing a life. Even like my staff within Smart Home Choice, they're off for the summer, and then they come back again, and then they're off for the winter. And they love it because they get to spend time now with their friends and their family and do things that they enjoy. Yes, I can make more money, but we talked about this earlier, that money is not everything, right? To me, it's really time.
Yeah, time is so critically important. And I mean, my caveat around time is I have to really be cognizant of when I'm actually spending time versus investing time. And spending time would be probably like doom scrolling on Instagram, unless I'm trying to look for trends, that kind of a thing. Investing time would be building the business, or, once a week I take my son for a walk and we go for an hour, and just every week we go for a walk to the same spot, do the same thing, walk back. And it's just to give him space to just be who he is. And I think that's really important. And that's an investment, I think. And so I think if you know when you're investing time, I think that's really important. And when you're spending time.
Yeah.
And I think when it comes to time blocking, if you look at your calendar, like I'm very big on how somebody's calendar looks. When somebody's not hitting the goal, the first thing I do is I jump into their calendar. And if it's all white spaces, that's a problem.
Yes.
And if it's all just a Molotov cocktails of colors, then that's a problem too. And if they don't have any structure, because I think structure sets us free. A lot of people when they think of the word freedom, they think of, it's like people who say, I want to be a real estate agent because I want to be my own boss. And it's like, well, if that's the reason, you're probably not going to be successful. I don't want to have somebody telling me what to do. Well, you will have somebody telling you what to do.
Yeah.
You're going to have customers telling you what to do. You're going to have the real estate board telling you what to do. You're going to have a broker telling you what to do. Your bank is telling you what to do. Your MasterCard's telling you what to do. Your wife's telling you what to do. Your husband's telling you what to do. Everybody's telling you what to do.
Yeah.
And other agents down the road are telling you what to do.
Yeah. Yeah.
People not even in the industry are telling you how to be successful.
Yeah. And those first 5 years are tough. You better turn that Netflix off. You got to grind. You got to work hard if you really want to be your own boss. It's not as easy as, people see the success afterwards. They don't see the grind. They don't see when you're up until 3, 4 o'clock in the morning. I've done many, many late nights. I would say it's only within the last maybe year or two where I'm like, hey, I can actually go to bed at 10 o'clock. I've got structure. I've got teams. I've got systems and processes in place and things that are happening within my different businesses that are moving and doing things that I don't know how they all completely work. And thank God, but we have processes and systems and documentation. If somebody was to leave, we can put somebody back into place to make that cogwheel run how it's supposed to,
Yeah. And that what you're saying is systems will set you free.
Yes, 100%. But in the beginning, you have to be the IT manager. You have to be the web designer. You have to be the marketer. You got to be the social media. You got to be it all. And then you'll figure out what you're good at and you focus on your genius and you start to slowly, outsource what you're not good at.
Well, I think it's so critically important to realize that nobody wins alone, and there's too many times people want to be the everything in their business. Like nobody does it better than me, and I can't let anybody else do that because I do it the best. And the amount of limiting belief that is included in that statement, and the amount that is going to hold you back from being able to be the person that you could be, because there is going to be somebody who does some part of your business better than you.
100% for sure. And the other thing as well too, just to touch and finish this off, is that if you are going to outsource, remember this, and I think this is where some people make the mistake in the beginning, is that when you're outsourcing it, you got to make sure that you're leveraging it properly. So if I'm going to outsource cutting my lawn and somebody can do it for $50, I better be able to make money for $100 in that same time. That's leverage, as opposed to luxury where I outsource somebody to cut my lawn for $50, but now I go play tennis and I'm losing money. So you got to be careful.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right? And just understand the difference, right? One is luxury, one is leverage. That's all. Just understand the difference.
Yeah, luxury versus leverage. I think that I think as you're making a decision on outsourcing, that's a perfect statement. I think you put that very, very well.
Yeah.
And especially because when you look at the Canadian economy right now, I mean, we're in a situation where it's tough for a lot of people. I mean, we've got high household debt, unemployment's going up. We've got tariffs of the yin yang coming into our way, maybe out. We don't know. We have a government that maybe is working, maybe isn't working. I know they show up when they feel like it, so to speak, prorogued, whatever the heck that means. And so we're in this situation right now where we're running a business like you are, or somebody who's just saying, I just need to make a decision on buying a house, or I want to get into an investment property. What does somebody do to make this decision? How do they get into action?
The economy doesn't have to be your economy, right? And so you can create an economy within an economy. You can. And so even if you're in a situation where maybe your job may be impacted by this, then you shouldn't just be relying on one source of income. And so this should be a wake-up call for a lot of people to say, maybe there's something else I should be working on in my free time. Maybe there's another way for me to bring in additional income because I have a spouse, a partner, kids, family that rely on me, whatever it may be. But this is a great wake-up call for a lot of people that Trump's not coming to save you. Pierre's not coming to save you. You have to save yourself. Stop waiting for people to save you and create your own economy in whatever economy is happening, period. That's it. That's just full stop.
Yeah, I think there's so much bravado to say that the economy is affecting you because you, no offense to you, are probably a blip in the economy. And a small growth in that little blip would be massive to you, but the economy wouldn't even notice. And so that ability to create that growth should be easy to realize, knowing that you've got to figure out that mechanism for success.
Yeah. 100%.
And you just got to get out of your head that it's hard to do. And that's the first thing you got to beat.
And I'll share when people say, yeah, well, it's easy for you to say. Well, look, I'll tell you how I know this because I've been there. In 2008, when we had the financial crisis in the US, up here, our real estate market didn't take a big hit. But a lot of the banks, when I was working at TD, they were getting ready to start laying people off. And I remember going in one day, they called it Black Monday, and they just started firing people left, right, and center. And I'm sitting in my cubicle. I just bought a house. I got 2 young kids at home, a wife, and I'm like, I can't lose this job. Like, I need this job. And at the end of the day, the manager comes out and he goes, all right, everybody, whoever's left, you guys are safe. And I remember driving home. And I said, never again. And this is what people should do today. Never again will I ever allow anybody to be in control of my financial freedom or future. And that was the day that I changed my life.
And it's so interesting because you're in real estate now. And one of the key components of real estate is agency, is that you have to have agency. And in real estate, you have a fiduciary duty to your client. You have to give them the agency experience to represent them. But you as an individual, whereas somebody's not representing you in a transaction, you need to represent yourself. So that would be in your job, in your relationship, in your health, in all of these aspects of your relationship with your kids, you have to take that agency. Don't let somebody else take it away from you. And the second that you say it's the government's responsibility, the second you say it's my Aunt Ruth, she's just so overbearing, whatever it is, you've given that agency to that individual and you've lost control.
Yeah. And wherever you are in your life today, it's your fault. Period. That's it. Like it's just period. But you can look at it the other way. And these are the people that complain and say, well, no, it's the government's fault. And I think we talked about this earlier too. Is like, yeah, listen, man, we pay too much taxes. I get it. But look, man, I'd rather have a fat goose than no goose at all, because I don't know how to pave roads. I don't know how to get gas to my house. I don't know how to get hydro to my house. There's a lot of things I don't know how to do. So yes, is the government too fat %? But I'll work within the environment, because everything that impacts us, like it impacts us all. And so there are people who are incredibly successful. There's people who are in that middle range, and there's people who are not. And so then what's the difference? And you got to figure that out. That's what you've got to figure out. How do I get out of where I am right now if you're not happy to change my lifestyle? And that's what I did. And that's what anybody can do. You don't have to fly south like a bird in the winter. You don't have to, right? We can change our direction like that. We can change our feelings and our emotions whenever we're ready to. We can change what impacts us, but it's your decision.
Yeah, I had a friend of mine who changed my perspective on tax in Canada, because he looked at certain things like in Canada, you can sell your principal residence, spend all this time building up this asset, you sell it, there's no taxable implications in that. Fly south, that's not the case. You can structure your business in a way that you can be tax advantaged in Canada that you can't do in the US. There's ways that you could structure yourself so that you're going to get the same perceived tax advantages in the States in Canada without having to go south of the border. And I think it goes down to exactly what you said. It's all about that perspective. It's about how you look at that thing. Is it going to be a problem, or is it going to be an opportunity? And if it's an opportunity, you will find a way. And if you do end up having to pay some tax, knowing full well that that portion that you're paying is supporting the things that the roads, the infrastructure, the doctors and all those other things that we have, then that's okay too, because it's good to have those things behind us.
Yeah.
And so the perspective, I think, is one of those things that if we can get that into the DNA of our success, fix our perspective, and then back that up with massive action, I think you become unstoppable.
100%. And put yourselves in the right room. Listen, I was driving out because, I live out here in Whitby and Oshawa at the time. And I was having to drive all the way out to Oakville and Mississauga to go to these events at 7 o'clock in the evening, 8 o'clock in the evening, and coming home at 1 in the morning, and then waking up and going to work. But I mean, I would go to those rooms and I'm like, I paid $20 to get in there. I'm like, I can't believe all this information I'm getting. Nobody taught me any of this. And, how to set up a business and different structures, and, how to start up. It was just incredible. But I had to put myself in those rooms. I had to drive there. Nobody was going to come and just give it to me. I had to take action.
There was I have this sitting on my desk just to show people, is that these are all the shows that I went to last year. Yeah. And I would say that's about half of them, but it's just kind of sitting here because I was going to break those out into something.
Yeah.
You got to get into the room. You've got to get into the room, and sometimes it's going to cost money. But, if you pay, generally you pay attention. And so get into that room and spend time with people that are bigger than you.
Yeah.
Because if you're the smartest person in the room, you're in the wrong room.
Yeah, exactly.
And you got to surround yourself. It's, Jim Rohn, I think, is the one who said, you are the sum of the 5 people that you surround yourself most with.
Yeah.
And so leverage that and say, how can I get myself with people who are doing the things that I want to be doing, not the people that I shouldn't be doing it with.
Yeah. And listen, some of the rooms that I'm going to now, I'm still going to the rooms. I got an event I'm going to at the end of the month, 3-day event. And I know quite a bit of the information that'll be taught, but I always leave with something that connected something new for me. Boom. And that's what I'm looking for. I'm just looking for more, because you get to this 80%, but then getting from 80% to 90%, that's just that consistency. That's that discipline. That's just showing up all the time.
Well, to get to that 90% from that 80%, you still have to do the 80.
Yes.
And that's the problem. That's the big thing. That's when you talk about shiny object syndrome, I think that happens, especially when I bring it back to the gym, and, people want to learn that new fancy technique that they just saw in the last competition, spinning elbow or the arm bar that was done from a reverse omoplata, blah, 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 flux capacitor. And they're like, I want to learn that. And you're like, no, you're going to learn the basics.
Right.
And you can do the basics over and over and over again. And people always say, I got to get back to basics. My question is, why did you leave them? The basics are there as a reason. And that's your platform for success to build on, but you got to do that 80% first.
Yeah.
Then you earn the right to do that last 10%.
Yeah, for sure. Basics and fundamentals, people know about fundamentals now after high interest rates, and, we grew up in an age of going to events where they taught us fundamentals, not to speculate, right? To understand the difference between a fixed rate and a variable rate, and knowing when's a good time to maybe lock in, and the importance of cash flow. And, so you can use those principles across many spectrums.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. I absolutely agree. Hey man, it's been an absolute pleasure chatting with you. And for people to get a hold of you, what's the best spot to do? I know you've got your podcast. Let's talk a
Yeah.
little bit about that, because I think it's an awesome thing that you're getting out there and you're sharing your voice with the people. So let's talk a little bit about your podcast.
Yeah. So I got a podcast. I started that back in 2016. It's called Real Talk with Gary. I'm on Spotify, iTunes, YouTube, and I would say it's one of the best things I started. And the reason why is, man, I've learned so much from so many people that have paved an incredible road ahead of me that I've been trying to either go down or maybe not go down, depending on what they've shared with me. But I've opened it up for not just only real estate investing, but also mindset, wealth, health. I've had, people come on there and talk about many different aspects of life. And it's opened up many, many doors for me. So yeah, I love it. It's more of a hobby than anything else. It can be a full-time job. So be careful you want to get into it, but I love it. I absolutely love it. It's one of the best things I've ever done.
Yeah,
And they
I
can
couldn't
also
agree
find
more
me
with
on
that.
social media, Instagram, just by my name, Gary Herbert. You'll see me.
Well, it was easy to find you, socially speaking, when I did my research. So definitely just look you up. So easy to find. And I do agree that podcasting is so critically important. It lets me connect with great people like you to have conversations that we wouldn't have had this conversation maybe necessarily, sitting at a coffee shop. And if we did, it'd be a shame for other people to miss out on it. So Gary, it's been an absolute pleasure. A lot of these tool sets that we talked about today, I'm going to implement in our mortgage business as we're talking with people. And I love the idea of whiteboarding. I think that to me is just such a critical thing to integrate there. And guys, if you're looking as a brokerage to go out and join, if you're a real estate agent, check out Gary Hibbert. Watch this podcast, watch it again, get to know him, and then go out and see him. So, guys, this is the money, this is the mindset, this is the mentoring podcast. We'll see you on the next one.
Thanks, Steve.